time. If you haven't already subscribed, click the link in the bottom right hand corner and click the notifications bell so you'll be informed when I upload new content. I thought in this video we would talk about time. Now, I've mentioned this before in previous videos. When is now springs to mind, and a common thread in the last few videos is this idea of the present moment. In fact, one could argue that that's the common theme of the channel, seeing now, the present moment, and experiencing that in, shall we say, real time. I'll come on to that a little bit later. But first I thought I would start with a couple of quotations that are apt for this recording. Saint Augustine said, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain to he who asks, I do not know." D.T. Suzuki says, "The intuitive recognition of the instant, thus reality, is the highest act of wisdom." And I think what these quotes have in common is the ephemeral nature of what the present moment is, the current moment, this instant. And when we talk about instances, we often frame them within a time analogy. So we link to what time is it now, and that could include the date. So I could say that it is 3:30 p.m. on the 18th of April 2022. But of course that then has instantly become historical. It's in the past by 5 or 6 seconds already. And this idea of real time, of course, well, that's problematic. You could argue that I am recording this video in real time, then you will be watching it back as a recording, and it will be history. It'll be historical, albeit maybe 2 or 3 days old. But regardless of the fact that when you are watching this will be history, there seems to be a connection between the recording I'm making now in real time and your experience of listening and watching it. That does seem to be linked. After all, it's your present moment within which you are watching the recording, even though it is historical. Clearly, it's been experienced in your now, so to speak, in the same way as the recording that I'm making now in real time is in my now. But they are different nows, and we separate the two by this demarcation that we call time. This was recorded in your now, perhaps 3 days ago, 4 days ago. You can look at the calendar and work out exactly how many hours ago it was recorded. But I would argue that this message and these words cut through that demarcation, that subjective experience of time, in a way that transcends time and connects us together in our respective nows, which in some sense I intuit is the same now, even though clearly in terms of linear time they are different nows. So we've already entered a little bit of a wormhole in terms of trying to define what the current moment is, what this instant is. And even if I try to talk about it now, there's no way that I can isolate it. These words are flowing through the ever-present now. They are unfolding, and as soon as they have been spoken, they are in the annals of history. Instantly they are in the past. But there is something present in the discussion. There's something present in the articulation of these ideas in the moment that has to exist in order for me to be here and alive and articulating this message. There is something alive here and animated that lives in the eternal present. Einstein's special theory of relativity shows mathematically that time is relative to the observer. It is subjective. That, in fact, there is no universal constant called time. Time and space are relative. And this is a scientific fact. Relative to the movement of the observer, their velocity. In short, moving clocks tick at a slower rate. But we won't get into that here. Suffice to say that the speeds and velocities that slow time down relative to an observer at rest are so high that we don't notice any perceptible differences in time here on Earth. And so already we're chasing our own tails here, trying to find out what the present moment is, where it is, how we can measure it. And I think all we're left with is the experience, the subjective experience of being. And we use it in our common vocabulary. For instance, we would say, well, she was totally present. That could refer to somebody who is an Olympic athlete in the moment, setting a world record, or it could be someone you were talking to, or someone who was listening and talking and responding to you out of a place of pure presence. They were totally present. And in both these situations, what we're trying to point to is the ineffable, indefinable quality that someone exudes when they are totally in the moment. And of course we can come back to nature, and we can come back to a beautiful environment like this, and you could argue that it's far easier to find presence here, and even easier to find it in silence. And so perhaps it's simpler to define those two worlds and see that they are in one sense separate, and in another one complete organic unfolding. So the world of time, measurement, seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, days, months, years, decades, centuries, that's one world, and we live in that constraint, obviously and clearly, we have to recognise those constraints and work with a shared understanding of time, but in the other world recognise that that is something that we have imposed upon the world in order to coordinate and function our societies in a easier and more logical and fluid way. One could argue that it's not easier or fluid, and it actually makes life harder. Nevertheless, a shared idea of what time is seems to be very important, certainly in today's society and in the pressures of the events of our lives and how we have to be at certain places at certain times. So purely for practical and pragmatic reasons, time is important in that sense, but there is this deeper present moment sense of being alive, that if we just drop those artificial impositions of time and just sit in the present, it's easy. We don't find that present moment, of course. That present moment finds us. Perhaps that's what true meditation is. And you can listen to these words and watch these pictures in your present moment, in your unfolding, ever-present now. And we can share, in this instant, across time, that eternal and essential truth.